Good evening. Okay, till the others join, so we will continue. So today we are talking about testing and non-testing techniques in counseling, right? So then first we'll talk about the testing techniques that under testing techniques, we can talk about achievement tests. So then are you two working in schools?
Yes, ma'am. I'm
Yeah.
working.
Okay. So then achievement tests that we use to check the knowledge and skills of a child or a person. And there are a number of achievement tests, and some of the achievement tests are created by the teacher. So in your case, do you have that experience of producing your own achievement test for the students? You don't?
Yes, ma'am. Sometimes.
Okay. For what kind of things? Is it for continuous tests, continuous
Uh,
assessments?
no, it's actually before the term test. Teachers are allowed to make some questionnaire related to the what we have covered syllabus. I mean, like syllabus areas, and we can just give paper for the children, and we can discuss and get the answers from themselves, and we can get some assess on that.
So what's the purpose of that? That you want them to give the idea that, or else that you want to see whether they have taken or whether they have grasped the things that you have taught to check their knowledge?
Yeah, ma'am. Mainly check whether they have gained the knowledge throughout the lesson, as well as, and if there's a problem, where do I want to do before the test? Where do I want to thorough? What are the areas do we want to thorough? Like.
So that's a great thing, because now sometimes rather than putting them into trouble after the test, so if you know the areas that you need to make them thorough, then you have ample time to do that. So then they don't need to be in trouble. So when they have covered everything, that's a great thing. Yes, that's good. So then that's been stuck. Okay. Right. So if we consider about type of achievement tests, there are so many number of types. One is formative tests. So formative test means that here the teacher prepares a test paper after teaching the lesson to know whether the child has gained the knowledge and skills given to them, imparted to them by the teacher, especially that continuous assessment tests. So we can give monthly tests, continuous assessment test, right? School-based assessments, right? Then summative tests are O-level, A-level, or term test papers, right? So summative tests are given at the end of a training or course, or to assess the outcome of the instruction. So especially that term tests, they come under summative test. Even O-level and A-level also come under summative test. So it's also at the end of a course, after O-level, after learning for 11 years, that a test is given. Then after their A-levels, that they check whether they have gained the particular knowledge, right? So after completing the course, that they are given the test. Then prognostic test means, so they are called readiness test. Now, before giving a course, before awarding a course, that they give this, the employers, they give the test to the employee to see how much they will gain from the training, right? So then if they are, whether they are interested in following the course, or what kind of things he need to get from the training. So in order to gain this information, they are given prognostic tests. Right, then diagnostic tests, right? So now we have diagnostic test in medical field also, but here diagnostic test means, so if you want to know the areas the child is weak, the areas that the child shows strengths, And if the child shows some weaker areas, we can have some remedial measures to uplift the knowledge. So for that, we give a diagnostic test, right? The diagnostic test measure the performance of the students, that we can give it for different subjects, even mathematics, English. Then we know what are the areas that the child shows weaknesses, and we can help them to overcome through some interventions. Then these achievement tests are of two types. They are criterion reference and norm reference. So what do you mean by criterion reference? That criterion reference means that we assess them according to certain criteria. So then we, by giving this criterion reference also, we measure the strengths of the test taker. So it assesses the test taker's knowledge, what he can do with that knowledge, how well he can perform. So because they have already decided the performance levels. So whether the child has reached the performance level or below the performance level, so we can identify that through criterion reference. Then when it comes to norm reference, these are achievement tests that are designed to compare achievement of difference. That means that now if we consider about these tests, so we categorize them according to the marks they have gained. So there are lower achievers, higher achievers. That means we compare the individual performances with others. Then achievement tests can be made by the teachers, or there can be standardized tests. So as you told that you are preparing a paper to see before they sit for the test. Then you identify what are the weak areas and what are the areas that you should improve in the students before the test. Then, so it depends on the teachers, the way the teacher has designed it, the time, the marks given. Some of them set it for 100 marks, some for 20, some for 50. So the time differs, sometimes for 1 hour or 2 hours. So that depends on the teacher. So when it comes to standardized tests, they are achievement tests. So specially prepared by experts. So there's a uniformity in the paper. Now, if we consider about O-level paper, that there's a structure. And there's a scoring procedure that for, if we consider about a question, part 1 is given 2 marks, part 2 given 4 marks, part 3 is given 6 marks. So like that, the amount of marks given is decided. So if they have structured papers or one question, this number of marks is awarded. So like that, there's a uniformity and there's a structure, accepted structure. And administration of the test is different, because now in the monthly test, when you are giving your students a test paper, you don't arrange the class like that you are sitting for O-level and A-level. So the arrangement is different, administration is different. So then the experts develop with high technical standards these papers. Then the tests are highly reliable, right? So then the results obtained from these tests are used for promoting that, if you consider about O-levels. So then it decides whether the child can do biology, engineering, that means mathematics or commerce, right? So then this is used to evaluate the students. Example, GC O-level and A-level examinations. Then there are interest tests. So interest test means that is basically to identify or assess the interest of the individual related to the academic success or for the job satisfaction. So we can measure their interest towards the job or their studies. So, but these tests only cannot be taken for identifying the strengths of the people, because it just gives us the idea of their interest. So therefore, if we want to give some, that means if we want to direct the child for some kind of course or a job, we have to consider some other tests. That means personality tests, achievement tests, diagnostic tests, along with this interest test, right? So then, so these tests, they are helpful for the people to make their make choices related to what kind of courses they want to follow, what kind of career choices they have. So it depends on their interest. Then when we come to aptitude test, so especially that Sri Lanka administrative service, so that for that or some other exams that we have an aptitude test. How do you call in Sinhala? Buddhi. What is that? Aptitude? Can't remember the Sinhala word. For that sometimes they have to study. There are books designed for these tests, and there are classes conducted. So then you can attend the classes, or you can refer the books and sit for this aptitude test, which measures your ability related to the particular subject. Then, so aptitude tests, they measure the natural ability of the individual or the suitability of the individual, the intelligence for the particular course or particular job, right? Then attitude tests, right? So have you heard about the Likert scale? If you have done some research, we give Likert scale questions for this test takers or candidates to identify their attitudes, their perception related to something. So if you want to know about their attitude related to something or their perception related to something, you can give this Likert scale questionnaire. So Likert scale questionnaire means you give an utterance, then you have 5 choices. So now here that as an example, the present education system in Sri Lanka should be reformed. Then there are 5 choices: strongly agree, 5, agree 4, undecided, disagree, strongly agree. So like that, there's a questionnaire. Then you have to circle or write the number in the correct cage. So it shows your attitude related to the given question. Then you have personality tests. The personality tests are conducted to assess the personality of the individual. Can you just tell me what personality is? What do you mean by personality? Yes. Do you have any idea what personality is? Personality එකක් තියෙනවා. Yes, Taranga? What do you mean by personality of a person?
The human behavior that we like reveals at in front of others, kind of thing, like how they behave, how they act, like
that is one thing. So if we consider about personality, it's a collection of a large number of things. That means one is physical appearance, that is only a part of it. Then knowledge, skills, attitudes, the quick adjustment of the person to the environment, then taking leadership. So all these things comprise, that means knowledge about different fields. So all these determine his personality. Sometimes that we look at people and say, oh, he has a marvelous, wonderful personality. But when it comes to his knowledge, his attitudes, actually he is not. So then we cannot measure personality only from the physical appearance. So it is basically due to a number of characteristics, right? So then, why do we need to conduct personality tests? So it is mainly if we want to decide whether this, because when a child is or a person is, that means if the person wants to follow a vocational course or educational course, that we can give a personality test before the course. Then, so when the person knows about his personality, so he can adjust accordingly. So if he says, if he thinks that for this job that my personality is not matching, so he can improve that, he can get adjusted. Then it is also essential for the person to overcome emotional conflict, because sometimes they may not know that they have these problems. So only from that personal test they may come to know they have these kind of problem. So they can manage their emotions, they can improve these characters like controlling aggression, sadness. So these emotions they can control. Then personality tests are used to assess the personal behavior preferences. Example, how he likes to work. Now, if sometimes we give a personality test for the person to know whether he likes to work, whether he can solve problem, whether he can deal with emotions and feelings, whether he can work with others, that interpersonal relationships, right? So we will go through a personality test. Okay, hope you can see. Can you see? Not yet. Tarang, can you see this? I shared a document.
Yeah, we
Okay,
can
right. Now here,
Yes.
here that it shows now here, sometimes it's better to lose than to risk hurting someone. So it shows our soft skills. So sometimes we have to, without hurting other people, sometimes we get hurt ourselves. So we lose certain things, but we don't like to hurt others. I'm generally good at making small talk. Established practices and or standards should always be followed. I sometimes lose control of my work day. So out of these four, actually tell me yours. You go through this and tell me now, imagine about yourself and which one you would select. Go through the first four and select yours. Okay, what's your answer for the first one?
A.
Okay, sometimes it's better to lose than to risk hurting someone. So that means you have that kind of soft skill, interpersonal relationships. For B, number 2. Here there is no exact answer, right? It depends on the person. That is why we call it personality. So there's no correct or wrong answer or an exact answer. It depends on your personality. Okay, number 2.
B.
Okay, I'm very careful not to be aggressively demanding of others. That means you are very careful about other people's thoughts and not to hurt them, and not to demand them by using force. Okay, 3. The bottom line means the workers, machine operators, peons. What is your answer? Yes, Taranga, what's your answer for the third one?
I would go for C.
Okay, even when winning might be at stake, it's better not to be too forceful, right? So number 4. Even if you want to change it, you can tell.
B.
Okay, if something has worked in the past, it's better to stick with it. Yeah, okay, can be accepted. Number 5. Okay, what's your answer for 5?
C.
See,
C.
once I give priority to a project, I follow it through. That means I anyhow or other, I will complete it. I won't stop on the way. Okay, number 6.
B.
Okay, I look forward to a good party with lots of people. I do not let day-to-day difficulties affect me. Most people are trustworthy. Sometimes we can't say that. I will risk untried but promising ways rather than follow safe, proven ways. Right? Okay, even I don't let day-to-day difficulties affect me. Sometimes if you just have some problems that you don't bother about these problems, you carry on your work. Okay. Number 7. Yes, what's your response?
Yeah, B.
People who act too slowly and annoys to me. That means you don't like people who are working slowly, right? You don't have any regrets about things that you have done? You are regretting about certain things you have done?
Not really.
Okay.
Yeah, not really interesting.
Okay, right. It's okay. Number 8. Yes, what's your response? Yes.
A. I feel like
I
doing lots of homework before I start anything. That's me. Like
Okay,
normally.
good. It's a good thing. I prefer knowing exactly how something should be done before I begin. That's good. Okay, next one, number 9. Number 10. And number 9.
A.
I'm willing to be pushy in order to get what I want to be done. So you have your inner strength, inner force to get whatever the work you want to be done, right? Okay. Right, 10. Yes.
D.
I never hesitate to take quick actions. So when you want to take actions, you take quick actions. Okay. Right. So can you see the screen or do I have to share again? Can you see the PowerPoint presentation? No?
No, not yet. That's the PDF from that,
Okay, right.
from the book.
Okay.
No, ma'am, not yet.
Okay, okay. Right. So earlier, previously, we were talking about testing techniques like personality test, achievement test, diagnostic test, prognostic test. They all were testing techniques. Now we are going to talk about non-testing techniques. So we use these techniques in counseling to collect data. Right? It's mainly to collect data. So what are these non-testing techniques? Yeah. Interview.
Case study, observation,
Yes.
cumulative records, and questioning.
Question. Right. Okay. So if we consider about interview, so who are the two people engaging in this interview? Who are these two people? We can, if we name them.
So interviewer and interviewee.
Yes, interviewer and interviewee. If it is about a counseling interview, who are these two people?
Counselor and
Counselor and the
counselee.
client.
Yes, counselor and the client. Sometimes we say counselee also, but mostly we use client. Yes. So then it is one of the most reliable non-testing techniques to collect information about the individual. Why do we say it's the most reliable? Why do we call most reliable for this interview? How it becomes reliable? Why can't they tell lies during the interview? What will happen if they tell lies? Can't we identify them that they are telling lies? So during an interview, we are observing not only their verbal responses. So we are observing their non-verbal responses. What are these non-verbal behaviors of the people? Imagine that we are having an interview and I'm asking questions and you are responding me. So during this, while you are responding, I observe what do you observe? Your facial
Physical behavior. Yeah.
Yeah, your
Physical
facial
behavior.
expressions, yeah, emotions, your gestures. Now, if you tell a lie, that I can notice from your face, right? So if you are telling lies, that I can notice that. So therefore, it is reliable, because even if I feel that you are hiding something, I can ask questions to get that, right? So because now during an interview, if the client is hiding something, sometimes that may be the most important thing in this interview, that the person is hiding. So therefore, we have to ask questions and get it clarified at the very moment, not after finishing the interview or tomorrow after 1 month. No, at the very moment, we have to get it clarified by asking questions. So then interviews are also referred to as conversation with purpose. What is the purpose? What is our purpose? Why do we interview? To collect information about the individual, right? So an interview establishes a direct relationship. So if the client doesn't like to have an interview, we can't do. We can do a good interview only if the client agrees, right? Then only we can get a lot of information from him or her. In guidance and counseling, interview can be of several types, such as diagnostic interviews. So we use these interviews to secure information about the individual. That means now we can do an interview to identify whether the child needs more attention or therapy or any consultation. So for that, we use diagnostic interviews. Then administrative interviews. This is especially now, imagine a theft has occurred. So from the administration, that there's a committee and the suspect has been called and asked questions. So they are administrative interviews to warn, punish, or modify the behavior of the individual. Sometimes we advise and release the person. Okay. Then employment interview. So we have interviews to get selected for jobs. We interview them to see whether they are fit for the job. Admission interview. So it is used to see whether the particular person is suitable for the job, for the course, whether he or she is suitable to follow the course, whether he can complete it. Right. Then informative interviews means, so here to give more information, right? Imparting information. So during the interview, we give information to the client. So what kind of information we can give? Just think, මොන වගේ information දෙන්න පුළුවන් අපිට? Related to courses, jobs, how to find jobs. So the methods like reading the newspaper, then going through the Gazette notification, and there are certain websites, right? And so related to the courses and jobs that we can give information. The research interview, so they are basically done to find facts, figure out certain important data related to topic, right? Then counseling interview is used to help the individual to solve the problems. So we can have counseling interviews when the client has problems. So we just ask him questions, get the problem clarified, make him understand the problem and help him to find solutions for the problem. So counseling interview, we have two people. Who are these two people? A relationship between two people help them to have a good counseling interview. Who are these two people? Counselor and the
Client.
Right. So when they have problems or if they have something to be clarified, so we have counseling interview. So because they need the assistance of others for this. The main functions of a counseling interview. So now in a counseling interview, it facilitates the counselor to have face-to-face contact with the client and the counselor. So they are if the counselor wants to find more information, he can ask questions and clarify them. As I told you before, if the counselor feels the client is hiding something, we can get it clarified by asking questions. Then we can identify their non-verbal communications, right? Then these interviews help to collect information or data about the client. So it helps the client to identify his interest or personalities, traits. Sometimes they can't understand their problem, but discussing with the counselor helps the client to understand his problem. So the counselor can help them to solve vocational problems, educational problems, psychological problems, right? So by discussing with the person, the counselor can help the client to understand his problem and to find solutions by him or herself. Right. So before counseling interview, how can the counselor prepare for that? Right? So before giving counseling, how can a counselor prepare for that? Yes, first he should have a clear picture about the client's background, environment, strengths, weaknesses, and what made him have this problem. So he should have some kind of background to the problem before going for counseling interview. And he should have a good method So if a person to give counseling according to a method, he should know counseling theories, right? So the counselor should use a good method for the interview, for a good method to collect data from the client. Then, not only that, according to counseling ethics, the first one is confidentiality. When we collect data, we should not let other people know what we have gathered by interviewing the client, right? So that is one of the most important thing, because even when you have counseling with your students in the school, you should take measures not to reveal what you have identified, what you have found from the student with the members of other staff. So sometimes we can't rely them. They may spread it. They may tell to another person. That person will tell it to another person, like that. It will be leaked. So then for a counseling interview, the counselee or the client must be willing to take part in the interview. Otherwise, we can't do a successful interview. The client should have trust towards the counselor. Otherwise, we can't have a good, successful counseling session if the client doesn't support the counselor. Right. So there are certain steps of counseling interview. What's the first one? Yeah. What's the first step?
I couldn't get your question.
Right. So now when we are doing a counseling interview, there are certain steps. There are 3 steps. Now I have given in bold type. So these are the main 3 steps when we are doing a counseling interview. What's the first one?
Preparation of the interview and building a rapport.
Yes, building a rapport is very, very important. So rapport means to win the heart of the client, to have a good relationship with the client is very, very important to have a counseling interview. So that means to prepare for the interview, the counselor must plan the schedule of the interview in advance. So there should be a interview schedule. So because we can't just haphazardly interview people, we should have some objectives in our head. We should prepare an interview schedule that is called structured interview. Structured interview means we have already prepared some questions to be asked from the client. There are some unstructured interview also. By asking questions only, we are finding the information that these are not pre-planned, but at the very moment, we ask certain questions and get answers from the client and write down, and then we come to a conclusion, right? But here, if we prepare for an interview, we should have a plan. We should have an interview schedule before conducting the interview. Then, not only that, we have to consider about the physical setting of the interview, because if it is a noisy area or if other people can hear what the counsel and client talk, so then we should not select that kind of environment, right? So then we have to select a suitable environment for this interview. Then the physical setting of the interview must make the counselor feel comfortable, right? So if you take a very common place that everybody can see, then the client face difficulty. So then even if you find a very isolated area, it's not suitable. So therefore, when you're selecting a place, you have to consider lots of things, right? Then what's the second one? So we were talking about the preparation of the interview or building rapport with the client. So next step, to establish a rapport. That means now we have won the trust, but we have to maintain it. How can we do that? Right? So this will, so you have to be friendly with the client, show respect, show warmth, right? So you have to welcome the client warmly. Otherwise, that if the child comes, okay, sit down, I will come, wait until I come. So if you talk like that, he won't feel to tell his problem to you. So you have to be very friendly and you have to show respect, warmth, acceptance. So these things are very, very important. So we call these things respect, acceptance, empathy, warmth as counseling qualities. We should have all these things when we are having a counseling interview. So then you have to build a good rapport. Rapport means the sambandhatavya. You have to win the trust of the client and build a good relationship with the client. So last one is arrive at the problem that the counselee faces, right? That the main purpose of this is to make the client understand the problem and help him to take action. So find solutions to the problem. The counselor can make use of methods like observation, talking, and listening to collect data. So these methods will help the counselor to know the problem that the client is facing and the underlying causes. The causes and the problem can be understood through this, the third step, action. Okay, next one. Working jointly on the problem, right? So then not only the client, you also have to work with him or her. The counselor and counselee must work jointly on the problem. If you two just throw the ball only to the client, I can just give small help. So it is not a successful counselor-client relationship. So you have to equally help to find solutions to the problem. Then, while working together in solving the problem, the counselor can make use of techniques like empathy. What is empathy? Counseling skill or a quality? What do you mean by empathy? Tell me what is empathy. It's a very, very important thing in counseling.
To understand others' feeling?
Yes, to understand others' feelings as yours. Yours. Because you should get into the shoes of other people if you want to know their sorrows, feelings, emotions, right? So then empathy, active listening, you have to listen very actively, otherwise you can't understand his problem. Understanding, using humor, these are counseling skills we have to improve, right? Then closing the interview, right? So you can't just stop a counseling interview. So you must ensure that client is satisfied about this interview, right? At the end, that he should have some kind of positive attitude about the counseling interview. Then at the end of the interview, the counselor should have the necessary data with him that he has collected during the interview, right? Right, okay. Then after that, we can have an evaluation of what we have on the data we have gathered. Then we can have a follow-up. What do you mean by follow-up? Right? Whether the counselors, problem has been solved. And if we are pressure is again the counseling, so you have to have a follow-up to see whether the client has followed what you have asked him to do, whether he was able to solve the problem that he had, right? Okay. So counseling interview should typically cover the following areas. What are the areas? Now, if the person is already in a workplace, so we can get this information: previous work history, educational history, whether he is following any hobbies and what they are, what are his interests, family background, social activities that he is engaging in, his physical condition, whether he's suffering from any illness, right? Then self-evaluation is appearance, abilities, and personality. We can get some ideas about the person from an interview. What are the advantages of a counseling interview? So it's the best technique to get information. Why? I told you why it is the best technique. Why it is the best technique. Now, if you consider about a questionnaire, we can give a questionnaire to people to fill information. Sometimes, what are the disadvantages of, what are the advantages of giving questionnaire?
We can gather details in a broad way.
Yes. And even without our presence, we can just ask someone to give the question. Now imagine I want to collect some information about your school. I can just give you the questionnaire, then you will give your students and collect and give me the data. That's the advantage. Even we can give for masses. Even if you want to collect about 10,000, we can do. So even if we don't have a paper, that we can send a Google form, right? But the disadvantage is, sometimes when you are not close by, we won't get the expected answers. Why? If they feel they are lazy, that they will put a tick to something and give. Yeah, look, because we need actual data. But in the case of these people, they will just put but if we are with them, if we are in the place that we can guide them, so we can read each question and we can ask them to carefully read and find the answer. So we can do that. So as I did with you, so I gave you some time and I was reading some of them and I asked why, which one. So like that. So the disadvantage is, if you are not close by, we can't get the actual information. Right here, in counseling interview, it's unlike the questionnaire, but in counseling interview, there are so many advantages. Why? We can gather actual data. Why? If we feel that the child is hiding something, we can ask questions and get them without hiding, right? It's like a conversation. And if you build up a very good relationship with the client, the clients will very comfortable with you, right? So it's very easy to conduct if you are friendly, and if the client feel trustworthy, that have trust on you, and it's easy for the client to get understand his problem by getting some ideas from the counselor and solve his problem, right? Okay. I did you get the PowerPoint presentation and a note, because even I sent only 15 minutes before. Did you get it, or shall I share?
Ma'am, we got it, but we couldn't get the printout
Okay,
of
it's
it.
okay. So because I sent you only 15 minutes before, it's my fault. I will show you this because it's a kind of work that you have to do. Okay, just go through this. I want you to get an idea about what happens at an initial counseling interview. Initial means for the first time when they are meeting. So just if you have a book, that take down only the important things and tell me about the whole process. Right, I will keep this. Can you see, or do you want me to enlarge the document?
Still, we can see the PowerPoint only, not the
Yes.
note.
Oh my goodness, wait. New share. Can you see now? A word.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so when you finish the first part, you go through them and write down notes. At the end, I want to know from you how is the structure of the interview, or how an interview is done. So all the information is here. I want you to go through and gist out about this process. So just go through each paragraph, jot down the important facts and tell me, then I will go to the next one. If you are finished, you tell me. Do you want some more time? What do you mean by structure in the counseling interview? The counselor must structure, must plan the counseling interview. What kind of things he has to structure?
How to guide the counseling session?
That's true, but anyway, if you specify what are the things you need to conduct this counseling interview, we discussed previously. You have to think of the place that you're going to have the interview, then interview schedule. It's very, very important. You can't just ask questions and write down there. So you have to prepare a questionnaire or a set of questions to be asked from the client related to the issue or problem, right? That is how you have to structure. Right. Okay. If you have finished, tell me, then I can go to the next paragraph. Shall I move to the next paragraph?
Yeah, ma'am.
Okay. You have to gist out the whole thing, right? Jot down the important facts. So this is also important fact. So before starting a counseling interview, we have to make the interviewer or the client aware of what we are going to do. So you must tell, the counselor should tell the length of the interview, whether we are taking half an hour or 1 hour, and the purpose, and what to expect by doing this. You have to make him aware before starting the counseling interview. Oh my God. Okay, can you tell something, that some important facts you have gathered from this? Yeah. For the next one, how to start the session. Before that, structuring the interview, what did you gather? Do you want to see it again, or?
The aim of this is to like establish and build a strong relationship.
Right.
And the first session of counseling interview is aimed finding the issues that the client is facing. So that's the main, like through that. And the counselor has to decide about the time limit, the length of the counseling period. And he or she is supposed to let the client know the time period, then they can prepare themselves for that as well. So like according to the time, then how much information they can reveal in that time of period. And all, like when the session goes on, they need to keep track on time and keep updating the client. This much time is left for like keep going on the conversation.
Harani, do you have any other idea that you can add to this?
Yeah, ma'am. I also just got jot down that as a aim, counselors should build strong relationship between them. In first interview, that counselor can find out the issues of the client is the main thing. While talking, he has to get the problem within themselves. And establish confidential relationship is must. Listen to the client and try to reach their personal matters in a tactful manner. That's the main thing I have got. And decide the time depend on the age of the client as well as the issue, what is happening to the client and all. Most probably, if it is a young adult, it will last for 2 hours. By starting the counseling session, counselor should tell the duration of length of the time of the session, because at that time the counselor can ready to that session as well as he can gather his personal information for the relevant period. And most probably the first session, they can figure out how long that session should goes and all. I mean, like it should go to the 1 month like time, 2 months like time, and they can have some mutual understanding and they can decide according to their problem and the solution they want.
Okay. Right. Rauzan, do you have any idea or do you have the same ideas? Rauzana?
Yes, ma'am, same idea.
Okay, right.
Uh,
Go to the next one. Okay. Okay, then we'll go to how to start the session. Okay, read that also. How to start the counseling session. What do you mean by self-referral? Self-referral, so we do referral. Referral means we refer the client to somebody else, an expert. So now as an example, now imagine that a teacher is giving counseling to a child, student. But later on the teacher identifies that, so now her counseling is not enough to help with the client. So then she does the referral. She refer the child to another expert. That is called referral. The self-referral means the client by himself or herself come to the counselor. That is self-referral. What do you mean by what brings you to counseling? He has brought something to the counseling session.
No, but he plans to discuss with the counselor.
Oh yes, what made him come to meet the counselor? What brought you this way?
Maybe the doctor's some.
Yeah, so he asked, what made you come here? What was the reason for coming to the counseling session?
No.
Okay, shall we discuss? That's all. Okay.
Yeah, ma'am.
Okay, right. Start. Who would like to take the chance? Tarani, will you start this time?
Yeah, ma'am, I didn't note down that. Shall I just tell?
Okay, yes, tell what you have the idea.
So, ma'am, if a if a client come to the session through a third party, I think it's better that counselor should make some proper counseling structure to run out the session. It's very useful for the both parties. And
okay, so Taranga, can you give some ideas to Tarani's ideas?
Yeah, like here they have mentioned like two type of clients who comes, like one self-referred and referred by a third party. So as Arni said, it's like when referred by third party, it's kind of difficult to handle situation. They are resistant to the counselor. So at that situation, we need the counselor should have planned and structured sessions, like well-prepared sessions, so which like gain more rapport with the client and gather more information from them. And the counselor must always like show the warm and should be like warm and accepting person over there. And it's also mentioned that counselor starts like their sessions talking about various social topics.
Yes, that's the
is the situation like,
yeah, that's not for a long period of time, just to have the refreshing idea. That means just to have a friendly talk to begin the counseling session. It doesn't run for a long time because it's a short tea break. So at the beginning that they are going to have a small chit chat regarding certain things, then they shift to the interview, right? So what kind of questions they can ask? They ask from the client. So we have, now he mentions the time, we have about a half an hour to talk. And I just want to know that what made you come here? What made you to meet me today, right? Or else that you can say, we can have an hour and I would like to listen to your issues, to your problems. So why don't you tell? The counselor must make sure that he conveys to the client that the time limit set. So it would be, you have to use the time limit very meaningfully. So it is a must, right? Okay, right, good. We can go to the presentation again. So what are the advantages of the counseling interview we discussed? So now by conducting counseling interviews, we can gather a lot of information, and we can gather true information, because we can feel that when the client is telling lies or when he's hiding something, we can get it clarified by asking questions. So then we can make the counselor very comfortable by having a good, the chit chat, like as explained in the article, the note. We can have a friendly chit chat at the beginning and go for the counseling interview. Right. Then next one is case study. What do you know about case study? It is also a method of collecting data. What do you know about case study? Right? So a case study is a process that we can, that it's an in-depth method of collecting data, very in-depth. In-depth means we use different methods to collect data. So like we can interview, then we can collect information from the progress reports, documents, then marks. If the child was suffering, undergoing some medical treatment, we can take medical reports. We can interview the teachers, family members, friends. So by using all these things, right, we can get a very in-depth idea about the individual, right? So then it's very reliable way of collecting information, right? So case study is an assessment method that typically studies learning difficulties. We can use case study for identifying learning difficulties, emotional disturbances, and other behavioral problems the individual faces in their normal routine. So because it finally affects the overall development as well as for their education. So we can study about these children through different means. Even we can give a questionnaire if we want, right? Right. So these are the methods that we use to do case studies. The first one is preliminary information. So what are the preliminary information we gather? Tell me.
Name, age, sex, parents' age, education, occupation, income, number of children, and social status
of the individual. So we just get the background of the client, right? Then we go to the past history. We need to find the history of the person. The history refers to the information that has affected the development of the individual, that has affected the problem, that caused the problem of this individual, right? So sometimes it may be that he had a breakup. Because of that, he had undergone depression. He has taken some medicine for depression, right? Like that. So then some information related to the individual's social, physical, mental illness or relationship with others. Then we can come to the present condition. Information about the present condition of the individual. So like his physical, medical, intellectual, emotional, social, and interests. So we can get the information related to this. The information thus collected used by a counselor or a practitioner to find out the problem of the individual, right? So now by gathering all these information, we identify the problem. So mostly we use case studies to identify the reasons for their poor performances in education, right? So then actually I was sometimes back, I assigned an assessment for, it's an assignment for us, my students. So when they go for teaching practice, they have to observe a child who has a deficient problem. That means deficient means he needs the assistance of a teacher or parent for his studies. That means for this category, they can select even gifted children. Gifted are slow learners, backward children. So they can select anybody. Then they have to do a case study by collecting information. So these children, they collected information by interviewing the parents. So sometimes they give telephone calls to get the information. They interviewed the teachers. They just collected their abilities. If they can draw pictures, they attached it as an annex to the case study. Their progress report details. So then even if the child is undergoing medication, the photocopies of the medical reports, so all these things were gathered. And finally, the last part is, if you happen to be the counselor or the teacher, how can you help to overcome the problem and continue his studies? ඔයා මේ teacher වුණා නම් ඔයා කොහොමද මේ දරුවට මේ ප්‍රශ්නෙන් overcome කරලා මේ යාගේ studies කරගෙන යන්නේ කියන එක. Right? So then they created, some of them created very good case studies. දුම ලස්සනට ඒගොල්ලෝ case studies හදලා තිබ්බා. Actually they have worked hard. They had done a genuine work. So it's very interesting, but later on we due to certain difficulties that we couldn't continue, right? Okay, if we consider about the present condition, so we can collect information about the present condition of the individual, his physical condition, medical reports, his intellectual ability, emotional ability, social and interactions with others, right? His interests. So we can collect How can you collect that? This present condition, tell me a method we can collect the information. Even past history.
We can discuss with their family as well as the teachers.
We can
Friends.
interview. We can interview the teachers, parents. The present condition, we can interview the client. Right?
Client.
Right. So then information thus collected is used by a counselor or a practitioner to find out the problem. Then only that by collecting all this information, the practitioner or the teacher can identify the problem the individual was going through. Right. The following steps are taken when preparing a case study: locating the case. So then identify the case by means of by interviewing or by giving a questionnaire, by asking from the teachers or parents. First you find the case. Then you need to have an hypothesis. Hypothesis means that you come to now in order to come to a conclusion. Before that, now here when you are doing the research, you have hypotheses, right? So as an example, you tell like this. So the students' absenteeism is mainly due to the poor teaching methodologies. That is, this is your hypothesis. Now you try to prove this, or you try to reject this. So then this type, the null hypothesis can, if you are rejecting, it's a null hypothesis, or you can prove it. So like that, you form a hypothesis, you write. So your hypothesis, it can be anything. So the child's absenteeism is due to the parental negligence or the lack of motivation of the parents. This is your hypothesis. Then you are finding information, right? Like that. Then collect essential information by using different methods: interviewing, then observation, very important thing, observation. So while the child is studying, you can observe the child. How does the child interact with others? Whether the child is isolated? How does the child behave when taking food? Whether the child goes out without food, right? And how does whether he is active when playing in the playground. So you can observe. Then you can interview different people. You can interview the client. You can collect medical certificates or progress reports or test paper, test marks. Right? Then identify the factor that create the problem. So by collecting information, you can identify the problem. Maybe the parents have the child doesn't have parents, they have some other families. So the child is living with the grandmother. So grandmother has no any means of spending for this child. So like that, there may be some reasons. Right, applications of remedial measures and treatments to solve the problem. So then you can decide, you can suggest some remedial measures and treatment to solve the problem. Then you have to have a follow-up. Follow-up means whether your measures, remedial measures are effective, whether the child was able to solve his or her problems, right? Okay. The main elements of a case study are diagnosis. So first of all, we have to diagnose the problem. Then we have to go for treatments. We can do lots of, even if the client counsel is unable to give treatment, can refer the client to a specialist doctor or an expert counselor or a psychiatrist. Then follow up. Follow up means whether the measures taken were successful or whether he needs further treatments or further consultation. Right. So here, diagnosis, identifying the problem by collecting the essential information. Treatment involves application of remedial measures and treatment. Follow-up is done in a case study to know the effectiveness of the measures used to solve the problem. So you have to, it's a must. Follow-up is a must. Otherwise, you will suggest certain treatments, and if it is not successful, you can go for some other treatments. Okay. The characteristics of a good case study. So the case study must be complete, which means that it must collect complete information. So how can we collect complete information? Tell me. How can we collect complete information for a case study?
From the past histories.
That is one thing. Identifying the from the past history. How can we identify the past history?
So we can check with the school, either from the parents and sometimes from the client.
Yeah,
student,
we can
yes.
interview. Yeah, interview.
By interviewing.
Then what else?
Questionnaire?
Give a questionnaire, or we
Mm.
can even ask some questions, right? Then what else? I told you some other means, because this is an in-depth way of collecting information. We can collect their medical reports, progress reports, right? Okay. A case study must use reliable and valid data and information, though there is data should be very reliable. A case study must be dynamic, should be very active, and must provide complete information about the person. A case study must keep the information confidential. So that is a must, because it is the main ethic in counseling. We have to keep the information confidential. The confidentiality of information is very important. We should not reveal the information with others. A case study must use scientific techniques for analysis of the information. So we can't just write anything that we have in our head, or we can't write a case study according to our experiences, but we have to use some scientific techniques when analyzing the information in the case study. Right. So what are the advantages of a case study? So it can be used, case studies can be used to diagnose certain problems of the client and to give treatments. So as I told you before, it gives in-depth information. Why do we say in-depth information? Now, if we consider about interview, is it in-depth information? Interview ගම අපි එක පැත්තකින් විතරයි යාගෙන් questions අහලා ගන්න ටික විතරයි. But here case study, what are the ways we can get information? We discuss now.
Information from the third parties, the teachers, the doctors, like all the medical reports and the academic reports.
Right. What else? By observing, interviewing, from reports, right? So there are so many ways we can gather information. That's why we say in depth. So it enables a person to make suitable adjustment for overall development. So what are the disadvantages? Disadvantages of case study? Time consuming, because you have to interview different people. You have to observe the child. It takes time, right? So you have to go to different people to collect. Now, if you want to collect his medical reports, you have to consult his mother or father, talk to him. Sometimes they don't respond to you, right? Okay. So a case study is a subjective technique. What do you mean by subjective? Subjective means it depends on the person who does the case study. Even that she or she can be biased towards this. Again, I use some my experiences, my ideas, so it becomes bias. So then it is subjective. So it depends on the person who does the case study. It is a difficult method that can be carried out by experts and professionals. So case study is not an easy thing. It's very difficult. Interpreting the results of the case study is also a very tough task, because sometimes we can't interpret the exact results, right? Because we are finding information from different perspectives. So now, as an example, if we interview different people, we have to gather all the information and do that thematic analysis. Ideas, main themes, then that is qualitative information, data. Then if we take test marks, that is quantitative data. So then we have to do the triangulation. මේ ඔක්කොම එක triangulation කළා තමයි අන්තිමට අපි conclusion එකට එන්න ඕනේ. Right. So then it's interpreting results is very difficult. It's a tough task. Right. Then we go for observation. So this is a very effective method of collecting data about individuals. Right. So this is mostly done by people because it is also not that easy. Then tell me about now when we are doing observation, what are the things we have to consider? Imagine you are going to collect data by observing. Tell me that what kind of things you have to consider now here. If you consider about interview, that we have to have a pre-preparation, we have to have an overall picture about the problem, like that. If we get ready for observation, what kind of preparation do we need? Just imagine. නිකං observe කරන්න බෑනේ. Yes?
We should have some criteria. I mean, like, okay, if he shown kind of these behavior or the body language, he can come to this category. Kind of, we would have some structure on the observation.
Yeah, it is called observation schedule, right? So now, if we want to observe a child, now we first of all we select a person, so whom we are going to observe, and we can't observe everything. So we can't observe everything. So then we decide what are we going to observe, whether we are observing when the child is studying, whether the child interacts with others, or whether we are observing the child is at the playground, or even we can take 2-3 events, right? Then first of all, we have to have some objectives. Why do we do this? So what is our objective of doing that? So that is the most important thing. So you have to have some objectives, then you plan, you can have a schedule, right? And most important thing is you have to record what you observe. Otherwise, it is not valid. You can't just keep in your mind everything. You have to record somewhere what you observe, right? So observation is the most commonly applied technique for information collection in guidance and counseling. So then observation basically entails observing the behavior of the individual. So we use observation for observing the behavior, right? So then so what are the things that we have to consider now? There are a number of observation techniques. What are they? Direct observation. Direct observation means, now as an example, if I talk about teaching practice, right? Now imagine that you are doing your teaching practice and your senior teacher is observing you. Then what is your behavior? Then behavior. Your teacher is observing you, how you teach. Are you showing your true behavior in that moment? Can we observe you? No. Why? Then you are very kind to your students. You use visual aids, group activities, pair work. Can you try your best to show your colors when your senior teacher is watching you? But if that senior teacher observe you secretly without making you know, then that is called indirect observation. So we can watch the natural behavior. So you do all these things in the absence of that senior teacher. That is the indirect observation, right? That is the natural observation. So we can see your natural behavior of the person. Then participatory observation means the teacher also participate in observing the process. The teacher wants her activity observe. Now imagine the teacher gives a group activity and teacher observes whether the particular child is engaging in the activity, or he shows some isolation, right? Then non-participatory observation means he or she doesn't take part. He sends some questionnaire and collect information. That is called non-participatory observation, right? Now we will discuss only two, that is natural observation or indirect observation. Right? So then in natural observation, the specific behavioral characteristics of the individual in a natural setting are observed. Right? So it is not artificial. Now it's very natural because they don't know that you're observing. So now during observation, he doesn't know that you are observing. So he or she does his work naturally. Then you can observe natural behavior. So then in this type of observation can help to observe the real behavior of the individual. Right? So then we can collect real information about the behavior of the individual. Participant observation means in this type of observation, the observer become a part of the group. Right? So or else you have designed the activity and you observe. Right? So the observer builds a rapport with the group and the group members are not aware of his intention. Or sometimes he can do it without letting them know that you're observing because you are a part of the group, or you have designed the activity and you're observing their behavior without letting them know that you are doing it. Right? Even there also you can collect information, natural or true information. Right. Observation must be done in a systematic and objective manner. So it should be done in a systematic way. That's why we need observation schedule. And you have to have a preparation for that because you have to record everything. Otherwise, it's useless. And you have to achieve the objectives that you set at the beginning. The objectives achieve karaganoni at the end after the observation, right? Training for observation includes training in writing the observation descriptively, how to write it correctly, recording field notes, validating the observation. So you can validate the observation by data triangulation. Data triangulate. Preparation for observation requires mental, physical, intellectual, as well as psychological preparation. So you have to, it's a very strenuous work. So we can haphazardly prepare some questions or schedule and do. So it takes time, right? Okay. What are the characteristics of a good observation? Yes, there are some characteristics. First thing is, it must be planned properly. We can't do observation haphazardly. You should prepare for that. You have to plan it, right? So you have to have a pre-preparation for the observation, right? So you have to decide a time, tool means observation schedule, certain techniques you are using. Techniques can one. So I discussed whether you are doing direct observation, participatory observation, non-participatory observation, right? So you have to record all the information, right? Then it must be properly executed. This observation must be implemented properly, and observation must be properly executed in the sense that the observer must ensure that the physical settings are accurate. So now it depends on the objective. So if you want to study the behavior of the child while studying, you can decide, okay, I am observing this, right? Right. So then you should have sufficient skills to carry out the observation properly. Then next one, the most important thing is you have to record your observation. Otherwise, it is not valid. You have to record everything, right? Then it must be interpreted. Interpreted means the results of the observation. The results you obtain from the observation should be interpreted using appropriate tools and techniques. So if you have an observation schedule, properly planned observation schedule, and if you use certain techniques, correct techniques, you can interpret the results. Right. So these are the advantages of the observation method. So they are reliable, valid, and scientific because you observe. You can use one of the techniques like direct observation, indirect observation, participatory observation, non-participatory observation. Then they are most economical method in data collection. Sometimes if you do a research, you can invite some of your colleagues to observe and give you some information, right? Observe certain students. Okay. Then We can use this for people of any age. Even sometimes you can, if you feel to observe how the beggars behave, you can do that. You can select at what time they come for begging. What is their peak? What are their peak hours? So what do they do after 6 o'clock? Where do they go? With whom do they go? So like that, you can do some observation. Observation can be applied to groups as well as for individuals. You can observe individuals, or else you can observe groups, right? So then you don't need much training for observation. So you can do it with some tools and some schedules. You don't need to know much techniques, right? If we consider about the disadvantages of the observation method, they are subjective. What do you mean by subjective? I told you before. What do you mean by subjective? It depends on the person who observe. So we can't even the person determine not to become subjective, that it happens because sometimes our ideas, so our thoughts, they are added to the results. So then we can't avoid that. That becomes subjective, depends on the person who observe. Then observation can be used to observe the external behavior, not the internal feelings. We can observe only the outward behavior of the person, not the internal feelings. The observation record may not be accurate and may be biased. So maybe may depend on the person who observe. Then sampling and observer error may take place in observation. Sometimes errors may take place, which make the information invalid and unusable. Some observation data okkoma වැරදි වෙන්න පුළුවන්. අපි wrong data ගන්න පුළුවන්. Right. Then diagnosis and follow up in counseling. So then when it comes to counseling, interview is a very good method. We can collect data. The other one is observation. The other one is case study. So then counseling is a process where the client and the counselor talk to each other. They discuss about the problem the client is facing, right? So then here in this process, both have to have an active participation. So when the client is telling something, counselor has to be an active listener. So how can you show that you are actively listening? How can you show? Yes?
Eye contacts and facial expressions.
Yeah, facial expressions through eye contact. Even you can have some short utterances. Yes. Then what next? So like that, you can encourage him to tell more, right? Then if you actively participate, if you actively listen, you can find the causes of the problem through the discussion with the the client. And so finally the last result, that means final result, is the client should be able to change his or her behavior. So he overcome the problem means that he should be able to change the behavior. Maybe that if we have a child who is always isolated, crying and sad, so if we see that he has changed his behavior, very happy and working with others, very in a friendly manner, show interaction, then we know that he has changed his behavior, right? The main aim of counseling is to help the individual to solve his problem. So in counseling, is it the responsibility of the counselor to solve the problem?
No.
No. Then what's the duty of the counselor?
He has to show the path to identify the counselor's problem and try to find the answer within that.
He is not finding the answer. So he has to find the problem and make the client aware of the problem. The client may know the problem. So then, so he has to, through these counseling techniques, that data collection techniques, he has to find all the data and find the problem and tell the counselor. So then we support him to find solutions by him or herself. But counselor is not finding solutions, let him find solutions. So as an example, now imagine there's a girl and the teacher notices, now she's a clever girl, and teacher notices that she gets absent from the school since recently, that she has started, no, she got absent to school. So what can the teacher do now? Yes. What can the teacher do?
The teacher can call home and check the reasons that you get absent.
Yes, or else that, yes. Now teacher can just check why does she come. So now imagine that it was identified that the child's mother has gone abroad and now she's staying at home to look after her siblings. So what are you going to do now as the counselor? You say, okay, then you look after your sisters and brothers and I will go. Is it your response, or how are you going to help her to solve the problem?
As a teacher,
that's the first step that.
Yeah, Tarang.
Tarani, go ahead.
Yeah, as a teacher, now teacher can contact father, either some other adult with that relevant child, and let them to come and have a small meeting with the principal or the headmistress and with the teacher. Okay. And they can listen to the family matter and the students' issue currently. And not the advising, but can show the way that if the child is at home and looking after the sibling is not her future.
Yes.
Likewise, we can
convince
them to understand.
Yes. So then let the child take a decision, or let the parents, or not parents, they let the adults of the child take decisions regarding her schooling, right? So you can facilitate to solve the problem, and you have to help the child to take the decision, take proper solutions for that. Okay. There are some only. Okay. So diagnosis, even we discussed about diagnosis. So it is the client try to identify the problem and the causes of the problem. So then diagnosis typically require the counselee or client to focus on the following: how the client view him or herself, the counselor's perception of the world around him, because these are the reasons for the problems. The perception, wrong perception sometimes cause problems. The process of diagnosis helps the counselor and the counselee, the client, to identify the strengths and weaknesses of the client. The client and the counselor arrive at a decision by discussion and talking. This enables the client to understand himself better. It is through the process of diagnosis that the client, assisted by the counselor, can find a solution to the problem on his own. So overall, we have discussed it. By identifying the problem, counselor can help the client to find solutions to the problem, right? So how can the diagnosis help the client in the following way? It helps the client in understanding himself. That's the most important thing. The client gains an insight into his strengths and weaknesses. He learns about his weaknesses and strengths. He becomes conscious of the characters and feelings. It further enables the client to use the knowledge acquired to bring about changes in his life. The last thing is, the client should be able to, if the client finds solutions, we should be able to see a change in his or her behavior, right? Then, on the basis of diagnosis, the counselor suggests remedial measures and treatments so that the individual can overcome his problem. They only suggest or they can guide to find remedies. Follow-up is also very important. So after giving some ideas, so we have to have a follow-up to see whether there's an effectiveness in the remedial measures taken. So then follow-up is always done by the counselor to know whether the remedy or treatment he suggested has been effective or not. That is why we need to know the follow-up, whether they have applied the remedies and whether they are effective or not. So if they are not effective, the counselor can go for some other treatments or interventions. If the measures are not considered to be effective, the counselor and the counselee or client again go through the diagnosis process and find other measures. So in short, now during the counselor-client relationship, counselor has to identify the problems of the client and make him convinced of the problem and help him to find solutions. In the follow-up, the counselor see or check whether these remedies that he has given or he has prescribed been implemented by the client and whether they are effective or not. If they are not effective, then again they are having another discussion and go for some other measures, some other effective measures, right? That's it. Right? On the basis of the diagnosis, the counselor suggests remedial measures and treatment so that the individual can overcome his problem. Follow-up in counseling is done to verify how effective the remedial measures have been. So this is the same thing we discussed earlier. Right. Right. Okay. So anything that you did not understand or you want to get clarified in what we have discussed. So what we have discussed today, we discussed non-testing, right? Testing and non-testing techniques. So under testing, we discussed achievement tests, such as formative tests, summative tests, prognostic tests, diagnostic tests. Then there are two types of achievement tests, criterion reference and norm reference. Then there are standardized tests or teacher-made tests. Then there are interest tests, aptitude tests, attitude tests, right? Personality tests, sociometric tests. So here we skip this. Sociometric means that we sometimes we find the social star, right? So or else that in the sociometric test that so here they are qualitative tools, qualitative data used for measuring nature of social relationship within of a person within a group, right? So we have certain activities to do to find the social star or the social relationship of the particular person in the group. So in the sociometric test, every student in a group is required to write about his first, second, sometimes third choice about a significant social setting. As an example, now ask that who out of these friends, whom do you like most? Then you can name one, first one, second one, third one. So like that, finally we find the social star. Social star means everybody's friend, that he may be that very friendly with everyone, helping others, like that we can find the social star. So we can find the relationships they have with others, right? So as an example, we can ask, whom would you like to sit next to you in the bus while going for picnic? So they will write a name. If they like somebody, they will write that person's name. With whom do you enjoy most in a social gathering? So like that we can find. So from the social metric test, we find the social stars and the person who are mostly interacting with others, right? So they are sociometric tests. Then we discuss about non-testing tests, techniques, that is interview, case studies, observation. So cumulative records means they are maintained by close relatives. Here, now the age of the child is recorded with his actions. Now imagine there's a child who gets late to speak, who get late to do work like others, then the mother or father, who is a close relative, they write all the age and number of words spoken, the actions, so like that they keep records. The questionnaire, you know, is the easiest way of gathering data. So we can give Google Forms, even we can give a printed questionnaire to gather lots of information. But the disadvantage is we can't rely 100% on the data given. So it is not the real answer, real information or correct data. So if we just give a questionnaire in a class and we explain what we want them to do and what we expect, so we can get it done being with them, so it will be successful. Otherwise, that giving a questionnaire only won't be a successful method, right? So that is what we discuss. Anything you want to get clarified related to these two? No? You don't have anything to get clarified, or did you understand, or you didn't understand?
I'm fine with that. Yeah.
Okay, right. So thank you for joining.
Okay.
Okay, Puta. So other two?
Yeah, ma'am. Thank you very much. Okay, ma'am.
Okay, Puta, right. So we'll meet again and we have some
Thank
more
you.
sessions during this month. Okay. So good night.
Good night, miss. Thank you.
Good night. Thank you very much.
Good night.